Hello everyone, this is Aaron Johnson with the Johnson iRacing team. Today we're at Langley Speedway in the Legends cars where I'll be walking you through the line I take at Langley. I'll talk about the marks that I look for, where I get on and off the throttle, and I'll give you some pointers on the kind of setup that I've built here to run at Langley. Langley is one of the tracks I struggle with the most, so I will tell you that it's sort of like Charlotte for me. I do struggle to be consistent here. But I've been able to run consistently into the 0.6s, about 0.63, 0.64, and very rarely run down into the 0.5s depending on track temperature. So I've got a pretty good line at Langley. My problem is being consistent because I find this track is pretty challenging to drive. All right, so today we're in the Jack Warren Trucks Mount Vernon Auto Supply 00. That's an homage to Ramey Johnson, my cousin who was killed in a racing accident at Speedway USA back in 1994. So let's talk about Langley. Langley is it's a fairly flat track. We're going to come over here and take a look at some of the info on the track. It's a little more than 3/8 of a mile. It's fairly flat. The two ends of the track are quite different. So the shape of the corners is different, and that makes this track kind of a unique challenge. The track temperature for this practice is fairly cool, 77 degrees, which is a nice cool track temp, so we're going to have a lot of grip. But let's just start out by hopping in the cockpit and taking a lap around Langley. So let's make this the cockpit cam, and we'll get rid of the info button here. And we're just going to take a lap. I'm not going to really talk. We're just going to ride around Langley. This is the first lap of a practice set, well, of a new session after I made some changes, and this was going to be the final race setup. So this is the first laps on a new race setup. All right, that's a lap around Langley. Laps around Langley are pretty doggone quick, 16.6, 16.7, so a 16-second lap for a 3/8 mile track. Pretty quick lap around a racetrack. This red mark right here is the mark on the wall that corresponds to the start-finish line. So now we're going to walk through a lap, and I'm going to start out with just my turn-in points and show you where I'm turning in, and then we'll do another lap where I show you kind of what I'm doing with the throttle. So what I'm watching for as I come to the start-finish line, we're going to back this up just a little. The first thing is I want to be as close to the wall as I can be without hitting the wall, really right at that red mark. So right here, I want to be right up against the wall. You'll notice that the rev limiter light is on. We're not quite pegged. We can go to really probably 11,000 RPMs here, and we're at about 10.5. So you want to be pretty close to the peg here. This is a track where keeping the engine in the power band up there on the high end of the horsepower in the power band is important. So you want to be right up against the wall. We can kind of see that. We'll get out and look at the chase cam. And I'm not quite as close to the wall as you'll see later in the run. And part of that's because I'm on cold tires and I'm trying to give myself a few inches just in case the car slips and wiggles. Go back into the cockpit. As I come up here to the start-finish line, I'm watching for this pole. This is the light pole that I'm looking for, so I've got the red mark, and then I've got this light pole, and I want to be turning in, starting my turn as that pole flashes by my A-pillar. This is the A-bar, and this, in the fiberglass body, this would be the A-pillar. So as this pole flashes by the A-pillar, I want to be turning into the corner. You'll also note that the wheel never does straighten up here on this little bitty short front straightaway. It seems like you're always turning out of 4 and then into 1, and you really never get a chance to straighten up the wheel. So here we're going to go forward. When I get to this pole and I see this pole start to flash into view, I'm going to make a pretty aggressive turn because my goal is going to be to get down onto the yellow line here in turn number 1. So you can see I'm already starting to turn. That pole's flashing by. I'm being pretty aggressive, and what I'm looking for is to get the left side tires of my car really right here onto the yellow line if I can. All right, so I'm going to follow the white line down, and right here at the edge of the corner I want to get 2 wheels on the yellow line if I can do it. I'm just a little bit high here, but you'll notice also that the corner doesn't have a consistent radius, right? There's a break in the corner, and the corner actually tightens right here, right? This piece turns just a little sharper than the rest of the corner has, and you can see that change in shape. So as you get to that change in shape, you're going to start actually letting the car drift. You're not going to be able to hold it down on the yellow line here, so you're going to want to let the car drift out, right? Also, as you do that, you're going to want to be right on the yellow line here, and you can see we should be pretty close. You get on the chase cam, and we are right on that yellow line, but not quite touching it. And right here is that little change in the corner radius, and that's where you want to start letting the car drift out. So we're going to crawl back in the cockpit. We're going to let the car start to drift out there. This patch is a pretty good mark. You want the patch to be sort of under the left half of your hood as you're coming out of the corner. That'll let you know that you're kind of holding on to the right line, and you're going to let the car drift. You're going to watch for, really what I watch for is this red sign right here. I want to have the wheel pretty close to straight by the time I'm to this red sign, and I want to be up as close to the wall as I can be. So that's kind of the arc that I'm taking out of the corner. You'll see right here, just as I'm getting to this red sign is when the wheel straightens up. Maybe this red sign, maybe if you're a little early, you get out, if you're a little high, you might be straightened up here. But right in here, these two signs, when they get to your A-pillar, you're actually going to get a chance to have the wheel be pretty much straight. So you have the front wheel straight, and your blue tape mark here would be at about the 12 o'clock position. That'd let you know that the front wheels are straight. You're not going to get to hold that for very long, because the next thing you're going to look for, at least the next thing I look for, is this red sign right here. It says country on the bottom. That's the only thing I've ever bothered to read. It's a radio station sign. So you're going to let the car move forward. You want to be right up against the wall. Looks like I may have actually touched the wall there. So we get in the chase camera. We are as close to the wall as we can get. In this case, I think I brushed it, but it didn't leave any pavement or any rubber marks on the concrete. When we get to this red sign is when we want to start our turn into the corner, and we're going to aim again for that yellow curb. We want to get two wheels right down onto the yellow curb. So I'm going to start my turn in just as I'm getting to this kind of, yeah, so I did hit the wall. You can see that I'm fighting the car a little bit. But just as I get to this new country sign, I want to start my turn in, and I'm going to be aiming to put two wheels right up against the yellow curb. So there's the turn. Should be starting the turn in. Actually, it was a little late, so I'm betting that I'm going to probably push up a little bit in the middle of the corner, and may not have a great corner here because I got in a little late. Actually managed to get down pretty good. Again, you want two wheels right down against the yellow curb marker here. And if you can get up on the curb a little bit here without having too much trouble. You can't get a lot onto the curb, but if you get up against the curb a little, it's not as big an issue as it is at some other tracks. Back into the cockpit, we're going to let the car roll through the corner and then roll back into the throttle and then head back out on the front straightaway, where what we're really going to want is to be right up against the wall when we get to this red mark. So let's take one more look out of the chase cam, and we're a little bit closer. We'll go ahead and go forward just a little bit. Did not hit the wall this time, but I'm about as close to the wall as you can get at Langley without hitting it there. And that's really the goal. The goal is to preserve as much momentum as you can. As you come out of the turns, let the car drift, preserve the momentum, preserve your speed so that when you're getting into the next corner, you're carrying more speed into the corner. This is about building as much speed as you can in a lap. All right, so that's a lap kind of showing where the turn-in points are. Now let's talk about throttle. So remember again, this pole is our turn-in point. We see this pole start to flash by the A-pillar. We want to turn in, and we want to turn in pretty aggressively. All right, so here we go. There's the pole flashing by the A-pillar. There's the turn-in, pretty aggressive. Still on the throttle. We're going to stay on the throttle until really the second pole disappears, right? So if we back this up just a little, there's the second pole. And as that second pole disappears from view, that's usually roughly when I get off the throttle. It can be a little early, can be a little late. Right here, the second pole is actually behind my mirror, so I drove in a little deeper than I usually do there. So you get off the throttle, let the car roll. You're trying to get right down onto the apex of the corner. When do you get back on? It's partly a feel thing. You'll feel the car stabilize because you'll feel it a little bit in the wheel. You won't get that kind of drifty, almost like it's wanting to slip and slide feeling. And you'll hear it in the headset if you've got the tire volume turned up, because you'll get less tire squeal as the tires are becoming less overstressed and they're making better grip on the pavement. That's about the time you'll roll back in. So as we move forward, we're going to try to get two wheels right down on the yellow. I'm a little bit high here, but we're going to be right on that white line. And then as we get to the apex of the corner, right in here, there's that change. Usually just before I get to that change in banking, I start to pick up the throttle. But coming out of 2, you have to be very, very careful with the throttle. If you get onto the throttle too hard or too early here, it's very easy to spin the car coming out of 2. And if you're running up front, it's really, really easy to collect a lot of drivers behind you. So you want to be really gentle with the throttle here. And you'll notice it takes me a long time to pick the throttle completely up. I'm barely at a third, 1/3 throttle here, still at 1/3. Now there's a big change in the radius of the corner here, and now I'll start to let the car drift out. Remember, this is roughly where we start to let the car go. And as the car drifts out, I pick the throttle up just a little bit more. Now we're pretty close to half throttle. Remember, we want this black patch to be kind of on the left half of the hood as we come out, and that's where we are. Picking the throttle up some more, but still not at full throttle, right? We've been on the throttle now for quite some time in this corner, still not full throttle. Finally pick the throttle up completely as I start to get to the lane dividers here, but I don't really think about that. Once I start to pick the throttle up, it's all about listening to the car, listening to the sound the tires make, and feeling the feedback in the wheel. That's going to tell you when you can give more throttle or less, but the earlier you can pick the throttle up and get to full throttle, the longer you make this straightaway, the more acceleration you have, the more speed you carry. So out of the corner now, I'm going to be watching for this first red sign. It's right here. And just about at this point, as these two signs are flashing by my A-pillar, I'm going to want to have the wheel straight, and I'm going to want to be right up against the wall. So here we go, out of the corner. Just as I'm getting to this red sign, there are the wheels straight, and I want to be right up against the wall. Learned my lesson from last time, so I'm not going to bounce off the wall this time. We can look at the chase camera, though. Still pretty close, about a tire width away, but about where we want to be. Right. So now, next thing to look for is this new country sign. As we get to it, we start the turn in, and that's a little better turn this time. I'm coming in a little earlier. Still on the throttle pretty hard. My off the throttle point that I watch for is the JEGS USG sign here. So I'm looking for this. This is a USG sheetrock sign, and this is the JEGS sign, and I'm kind of watching for those because as they come into the view and I start to get to where the USG sign is going to come behind my A-pillar, that's when I let off the throttle. And that is one that I watch for. So when I see the USG sign is close to my A-pillar, that's when I'll go ahead and let off the throttle. And I want to be off the throttle usually by the time that USG sign has flashed out of view. I'm going to let the car roll right down into the middle of the corner, again trying to get two wheels as close to that yellow curb as I can. And if you get right up against the curb, it's probably not going to cause you any real hard problems. So there I'm right on the yellow curb. We go back to the chase cam. And you can see that I've really got the two wheels just touching it. And you can actually get a little bit onto that curb without any problem here at Langley. If you get well onto the curb, it will cause the car to loosen up on you a little bit. And you can spin the car pretty easy. But still, you want to be right on that yellow line. How do you know where to pick up the throttle here? Well, let's back up just a little bit. This red mark is one of my markers for throttle. So there are two red marks here. There's the first one, and then there's a second one that's got the turn 4 sign next to it. Now, I try to pick up the throttle after this red mark disappears, but before this red mark gets over into the right side of my field of view. It's a feel thing. What you're really trying to feel for, you want to put your hands on the wheel, you want to pay attention to what the force feedback's telling you. Because as the car stabilizes, the amount of force feedback, the feel is going to change a little bit, and the sound in your headset or in your speakers is going to change because the tires are not being overstressed. So you're getting less sliding, you're going to have less tire sound, and as the car stabilizes, and back in the day when we were racing on pavement, we called it the car would set. It would take a set, the car would slip a little bit, then it would set, and it would just it would stick. Once you got through the corner and got the car turned enough that the lateral forces were not overcoming the friction forces that the tires made with the pavement, you could start to roll back into the throttle. So we're going to move forward here. This red mark is pretty much out of view. This one is just coming into view. I'm going to start picking up the throttle sometime before this mark gets into the right side of my field of view, if I'm lucky. All right, so I'm picking the throttle up this time just a little bit, fairly early. This red mark with the 4 is in the left half of my windshield, and that's kind of what I'm watching for. I'm going to pick the throttle up. Again, I'm going to be pretty gentle. You've got to be careful coming out of 4. Not nearly as careful as you do coming out of 2, but you got to be careful coming out of 4. It's pretty easy to turn the car around here as well, especially if you pinch the car down. So one of the other things that you're wanting to do here is you want to let the car drift back out so that you hold onto your momentum as you come out of the corner. So we're coming out of the turn. What am I watching for? Really, when I get to the end of the yellow line here, that's when I can really start letting the car drift. So the yellow curb ends right here because of the pit road entry. And so as that yellow curb ends, I'm going to start letting the car drift out. And you can see that my hands are moving to the right just a little bit, not a lot, but just a little. And I'm going to let that car drift out. We come out onto the front straightaway. And the goal is going to be as close to having the wheels straight as I can when I get to that red mark. Let the car run out. This time I actually got to straighten the wheel up. You don't get to do that very much. And as soon as I got to the red mark, it was back to putting a little left turn in with the idea that a pretty aggressive turn is going to happen again right as I get to this first light pole, with this second light pole being sort of my off the throttle point. All right, so here we're going to go ahead and get to that turn in point. There's the aggressive turn. You can see just as that pole disappears, I turn the wheel just a little more. Watch this, right? So that's about how much turn I had in as we went past the red mark. Now when we get to this light pole, we get a little more turn in. And just as the second light pole disappears from view, I actually drove a little deeper this time, and then let off the throttle. All right. Let's see what that looks like in real time. We'll back up here to the start-finish line, and now we'll make a lap. And see kind of what that looks like in real time. Turn in, off the throttle, roll right down onto that yellow line. Pick the throttle up as you come out. Make sure that mark is on the left side. Red, turn, off the throttle, rolling back in, and back out onto the front straightaway. Right, that's a quick lap. That was a 16.67. I'm always really tickled anytime I can run in the 16.6s. And in this particular practice session, a cool track with a new setup, I started running in the 16.6s on lap 12, and with a couple of exceptions, I ran in the 16.6s for about the next 13, 14 laps. The other thing I want to show you is how important it is to be down on the yellow line as you go through these turns. So let's ride a little bit. Right down on the yellow line again, out of the corner. You want the wheel straight by that red mark. Second red sign, you're turning in, off the throttle. Right down on the yellow line, and then back out, little wiggle there, back out to the front straightaway, 16.675, another good lap. Right down again, pick that throttle up. And down into the corner. I pushed out a little bit here, right? So let's back this up just a little, and you'll see just how far out I push. You know, the idea is to be two wheels right on the white line, but on this particular lap, chase cam's what I wanted, I'm half a car length up. And you'll see that in the lap times. So this isn't going to be a great lap. It was a 16.724. So just that push out. Turn 1 and 2 were pretty good. 3 and 4, I was a half a car width too high, and it cost me 0.06 of a second, which doesn't seem like a lot. But if you're racing in the top split, that little push might have opened the door to let 2 or 3 or 4 guys that were fast get a wheel under me and, you know, kind of run the train past me. So you really don't want to allow that to happen, because they just go by you, one after another after another. Let's go ahead and watch the rest of this lap. We'll watch another one. Again, right down on that yellow line, a little too low there, and that could cause problems. But you can get away with getting a couple of wheels onto the curb at Langley. Out of the corner, red sign, off the throttle, way too high this time. So totally out of sorts here. Now, in part, after I had made the first little mistake, I decided that I was going to go ahead, for the purposes of making a video, and show what would happen if I got way too high. So here I'm not a half a car width too high. I'm about a car width and a half too high. And so this is really going to slow me down, all right? I'm coming out of turn number 4. I'm going to be way too high. I'm running a longer line. I don't think there's as much grip up here, to be honest. It feels like the car wants to skitter around and slide around more. So one of the biggest keys is going to be keeping your car on that yellow line. So watch how much slower this lap is. Last one was a 724. This one's an 864. So that wiggle cost me a tenth and a half, maybe even 2/10, because I'd been running in the 16.64s. Now I'm running in the 16.864s instead of 6.64s. So 2/10 of a second a lap. Well, in a 40-lap race, that puts you 8 seconds behind the leader. So it's crucial at Langley that you get the car as close to that curb as you can without upsetting the handling. All right, let's try one more lap. And now we're going to try to get right back down into our groove. So I made one mistake, then I intentionally made another one. There's my mark where I want to be going straight. Here's my turn in mark, and I've started to turn in. There's my throttle. Right down on the yellow line. I got 2 wheels just above the curb, but it doesn't really matter. Back out on the front straightaway, and all of a sudden we're running a .637. I can't stress enough how important it is at Langley to keep your car on that yellow line. That's critical. You want a setup that's going to allow you to get on the yellow line, and you want to be able to get on and off the throttle, on especially as quickly as you can without burning up the tires, because the longer you make the back straightaway, especially that straightaway between 2 and 3, the more speed you're going to be able to carry on a lap. What else can we talk about? A couple of quick things, I suppose. Setup-wise, Langley, as with every other track, the Legends cars like low tire pressures. If you've got more than 14 pounds on your right side tires, you've got too much tire pressure. You really want to be, my opinion, 13, 14 pounds on the right side, 10 on the lefts always. You might even be able to squeeze that right front down to 12, depending on the handling characteristics of your car. If you're running 12 in the right front, 13 in the right rear, it'll loosen the car up a little bit. So if you find the car's a little tight, you might be able to drop that right front tire pressure a pound and make the car a little looser. What else? I run at Langley is one of the few places where I run the rear springs at a different weight. I run a 175 in the left rear, and I run a 200 in the right rear. I run a 350 in the left front, and then the right front, it depends really on the setup. This year's setup, I think I'm running a 225 in the right front. So I've got the left front spring again being the stiffest spring on the race car. I don't have as much caster split. So caster is sort of the angle that the 2 ball joints make with your spindle. If the upper ball joint's back, the caster is positive. And so I run positive caster on the right front and the left front, but my split is only about 2 or 2.5 degrees. So I don't run as big a caster split here. I find it's more stable. What else? Toe end's important here. More toe end means the car is a little tighter into the corner. Less toe end's going to loosen you up a little bit as you go in. So that's a way to maybe make some adjustments. I hope this video has helped you out. If you do have any questions, you can always send us a direct message on Facebook. We're just Johnson iRacing Team. If you just look us up, it's facebook.com/Johnson iRacing. Then you can also put a message in the comments on the video. Make sure you tag me in it. If you've got a question there, I'll be sure to do my best to answer it. But keep in mind as well that there are some slightly different lines here, and you should be watching some other drivers too to really get some insight. John Tuckness is really good at Langley. So is Tyler Shattuck. Matt Coker, of course, is good at Langley. Mario Cook, Patrick Day, Adam Hancock. Adam will help you out a lot of times with, if you see him on, hop in the car and shoot him your setup, and he'll help you try to make some adjustments to go fast. Another guy that really likes to help people find their way around the racetrack. So the other trick to remember is when you're racing in a practice session and you're trying to figure out how to get around a racetrack, if you go to the entry list and just double click on the name of the driver that you want to watch, you can watch them, but you can also select the camera. So if you double click on their name, it gives you the option to select the cockpit camera so you can crawl right in the cockpit and kind of see what they're seeing. It's a great teaching tool. Everybody can do it. I don't think that it's unethical because it's open and free to everybody. And I always encourage you guys, ask some questions. If you ask us questions, a lot of us out there are going to help you out. And we kind of want to see folks go fast. Well, with that, I think I'll end this video. It's a little longer than normal, but I think it's an important one. Langley's a tough track. So for the Johnson iRacing team on the Johnson iRacing Network, this is Aaron Johnson saying, go fast, turn left, have fun.